In this video essay, I will discuss the use of cinematography to create a story. Hot Fuzz, written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and directed by Edgar Wright, is a comedy film a part of the Cornetto trilogy. Edgar Wright is well known for his cinematography, but how he uses the skill so well in this film is storytelling. And a lot of other directors waste this opportunity and tend to repeat the same cliches that we've seen over and over again. At the beginning of Hot Fuzz, Sergeant Nicholas Angel is a policeman officer who works in the metropolitan area of England, when he finds himself being transferred to a remote English town far away called Stamford. The scene I'll be looking at today is one where Nicholas transfers from the metro to Stamford, and that journey he takes. Here's the clip.
Nicholas, Frank again. One other thing about your cottage. It's not ready.
This scene is only made up of 28 shots, and yet Wright uses it to tell a story. In the text, the structure of narrative, the case of film scripts, it is said that a scene is a miniature story and must have activity or change. Most directors might push this off on a second unit and have a list of cliches such as upbeat music, car driving shots, drone or helicopter stock footage, signs of where we're going, and specific landmarks to certain cities. This of course doesn't mean that those films are bad in any way, but is just that they are repeating the same cliches that we've seen over and over again. Wright takes an opportunity to play off it differently. Take The Hangover for example, by no means a bad film, but yet I can predict this scene before it even happens. The cinematography is limited, and everything I've mentioned previously shows up in this scene.
Wait till I get my money right. I had a dream I could buy my way to heaven. When I awoke, I spent that on a necklace. I told God I'll be back in a second. Man, it's so hard not to act reckless. To whom much is given, much is tested. Get arrested, guess until he get the message. I feel the pressure under more scrutiny. And what I do, act more stupidly. Wait till I get my money right.
Before we can break down Wright's sequence, we must ask ourselves, what is a story? The story is a very broad term, but in the context of filmmaking, it comes down to structure. To quote J.R. Rayfield, what is a story? A listener will accept an item as a story only if it has a certain structure, and this structure a certain minimal and maximal complexity. A common narrative structure are things such as the hero's journey, the story circle, and most notably the 3-act structure, in which we have an introduction, a rising tension, to a climax point. This type of story takes us from where we are to where we're going, and there is a change somewhere in between. In the 3-act structure, myth or magical formula, it states, the 3-act structure has become a dominant tool for analysing screenplays and films. So now we understand the structure of a basic story, let's break down Wright's sequence. First of all, it's important to understand that the quick cut shots always go from left to right. The movement is representing the journey. We open with a shot of a taxi pulling up. The taxi looks modern and clean, and there's a shot of the light on top. We see then Nicholas holding his peace lily, showing his attachment to it for later in the story. All the shots at the beginning of the sequence are fast-paced and only have an average of about 1 to 2 seconds. We see a shot of Nicholas's phone with high service. As he takes more trains, the tension builds in the scene with quick cuts and jarring noises, until suddenly there is a calm, as we see a shot of Nicholas sitting down on a bench. Here we have seen the introduction and the rising tension. This calm is then broken with a climax point of a train coming through and waking him up. It's jarring and alarming. This represents the center or the climax point of the story, And from now on, we will be moving down into our new location as things have changed. Another train ride begins, and there is another shot of his phone with now much less service at about half. There's another shot of a much older taxi that looks more worn and is in the rain. After the center point, the shots are much slower to indicate that we're slowly moving away from civilization and into the remote area of Stanford. There are then shots to indicate what will happen later in the film, such as a sign for the modern village and the tower where people will later be killed. There is one last shot of his phone where his service is completely gone. This indicates the remote world he is now in. Lastly, he's dropped off in the rain at a new hotel. We have now made it to the new place, there has been a change, and the story is complete. Each piece of cinematography leads us from where we are to where we're going. As we look at these shots in particular, these match previous shots and show us the move away from civilization, as this is the change that has occurred. In this case, we see Edgar Wright using his talent in filmmaking and cinematography to express this short story which would otherwise be quite generic. In conclusion, I have learnt that this scene shows the use of cinematography to create a story. Its use of shot types and movement follow the traditional story structure in a very entertaining way, and further expresses the talent of Edgar Wright